All right, so today in this video, I'm going to share why it is more expensive to be poor. And it's not just this common saying that you hear that people who maybe are on a lower income are in sort of this pit that's difficult to get out of. There is a lot of truth to it. I'm going to share those reasons with you in this video. So if you want to learn more about personal finance, making more money, saving more money, and building a better financial future for yourself, then make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this one. And hey, if you find any value in this video, make sure you drop a like. We'd highly appreciate it. Let's just get started with this. Okay, so let's start about the first one here. And this is not in any way a political video. I have no agenda here. This is just to share some things that do affect poor people more than people who are wealthy. So one of them is regressive taxes. So I don't want to lose you here, but there's really three primary ways that we can tax people in the world, right? So there is something we could see as a proportional tax. So say everybody has 10% of their income taxed, right? Whether you're making $10,000 a year or $10 million per year. Then there's also something called progressive taxes. That's what we see in the United States with the federal tax system for income tax, where people who are making a lower income are generally taxed at a lower rate, so maybe 10% of their income, versus people who are making millions or billions of dollars might be taxed at 37% of their income at the top federal tax bracket. Now that's a progressive tax. Then we have something called regressive taxes. So not progressive, but regressive taxes. And as I said, this is not a political video in any way whatsoever. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have regressive taxes, but it's something that does significantly affect poor people more than it affects wealthy people. So something like a sales tax could be a primary example of this. So to give you the example here, let's say that people are spending an average of $10 per week in sales tax on certain goods. Now, in some states, you don't have to pay sales tax on certain necessities like clothing and food, but others might be a little bit different, okay? So let's say that you're spending $10 per week in sales tax. Maybe your tax is 7% sales tax on certain goods and services. So $10 per week off of, say, somebody who's making $300 per week, $7.25 an hour, US minimum wage times 40 hours a week, about $290. So let's average it off to $300 per week versus somebody who's making $3,000 per week. So somebody is on a lower income, the other person is quite wealthy, making about $150,000 a year. So the person who is making $300 per week and paying $10 in sales tax per week on goods and services, so that's about 3% of their total income that's going towards the sales tax, whereas somebody who's making $3,000 per week and they're paying $10 in sales tax, that's 1/3% of their income. So 10 times more tax as a proportion of their income for people when we're looking at regressive taxes like sales tax. Now, there's some other really interesting ideas behind this. One thing such as the soda tax that they implemented in Philadelphia back in 2016, about 3 years ago now. It was really interesting, but this is one of the only things that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump actually agreed on. Very, very rare to see that happen. And as I said, I'll say this again, this is not a political video. It really isn't. I have no agenda here. But regressive taxes, they do affect poor people much more than they affect wealthy people. Now, I do think sales tax is important. You do need to find a way to pay for your roads. You do need to find a way to pay for the schools, and municipalities and states and cities like to implement some type of sales tax so that they can raise money for this. So that's one thing that does affect people. The next one here, higher interest rates. This is something that you can counteract. This is something that you can work against. Higher interest rates do significantly are put onto poor people more so than people who are wealthy. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of them, you have to understand that businesses, their primary goal in most cases is to make money. And so when they look at risk analysis and they think about how risky is this person to lend money to, well, if they have no assets, no collateral, they have not very much, maybe they have $200 to their name, and they have a bad history potentially or no history of borrowing money, then they're going to be faced with a higher interest rate when they're getting a loan. If they want a car loan, if they want a home mortgage, if they want some type of loan, higher interest rates do affect people much more so when they're on a lower income. And sadly, when you look at these statistics and you look at credit scores, you look at ability to borrow money, people who are on lower incomes generally do default more on loans. And for some obvious reasons, if you're on a lower income, it's more difficult to make it happen, to be able to pay your bills. And so to counteract this, to counterbalance this, building a credit score can be a very important step here. You want to make sure you go about it in the right way. We've made videos about credit scores in the past on this channel. If you want to get credit cards, be very, very careful with them. Go check out those videos if you're interested. And hey, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Okay, so the next one here, $0 down schemes. I really hate seeing this happen. But when you look at the decision-making process of, say, two people, say somebody who's making $15,000 per year and somebody who's making $15 million per year. The person who's making $15,000 has a little bit of a different decision-making process, and it's not anything that's natural. It's not that the person thinks differently, but it's more so based off of the amount of income that's coming in, forces you to make different decisions and thinking about how far you're thinking in the future. For example, and this isn't for everyone, but generally speaking, if people are on a lower income, what happens is, and there's books about this, you can really look into this a lot, but you're thinking a little bit more so shorter term because you have to. You have to think, how am I putting food on the table tomorrow? How am I paying my electric bill next week? And you don't have that luxury to think like a wealthy person who says, well, I have enough money where I don't have to worry about that as much, and so therefore I can plan it further out. So this is something that does affect poor people more often, and that is these $0 down schemes. I hate seeing this happen, but sometimes, so for example, I was just looking at some things to furnish my apartment with, and I've been trying to figure out how to get a nice look in there, and I was looking at some different things. Some of them, for example, TVs, right? I'm probably not going to buy a TV. I really don't watch TV, but $0 down TVs only pay $18 a month for the next 2 years, and the TV is yours. The problem here is that this really kind of wraps into predatory businesses here, because what happens is, if you are on a lower income and you see something for $0 down, a lot of people fall into this because it's something in the short term. You can say, well, I only have $50 to spend for this entire week for everything, for all my expenses, and I can get this for $0. Now, most people aren't that gullible to think that they're actually getting it for $0, but the point is, it's much more attractive at that point if you have little money at the moment. And so when you actually calculate the interest rates on some of these things, it can be 20, 30, 40% interest rates on some different things where there's no money down for a mattress, some of these different items that essentially businesses can really prey on people who are on a lower income because they know that in a lot of cases they are looking for something as a shorter term fix so that they can be able to pay for food for tomorrow and the next day, which is incredibly important. And it's nobody's fault to say that the person who is struggling financially, it's not their fault if they end up in these $0 down schemes. But just be careful with this going forward if you find yourself in that position. Just be careful. Calculate the interest rate. Calculate how much you're paying if it's a 2-year loan for this $0 down for, say, a mattress, or say you want to get a couch or some other type of thing. Actually calculate the interest rate. It's very simple. Just look at how many months you're paying for and how much you're paying and how much that's actually going to be versus the cost of that item today. So the next one is bank fees. Now, this one is very interesting because this is another thing that you can counteract, you can not fall into. But bank fees, when you look at the amount of fees that are charged, a lot of them are imposed upon people who only have $200, $300, and they're hit with these minimum account balance fees where if they don't have $2,000 in their checking account, they're hit with a $15 monthly fee. And you say, well, I signed up for a bank so that I can save money and now you're taking money from me. Banks charge a lot of fees, especially those brick and mortar banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, probably your local bank. If you're ever going to sign up for a bank account, which it is important to have a bank account, you don't want to just be using cash all your life and just put it underneath your mattress. But if you're signing up for banks, make sure that you're looking over this thoroughly to make sure that you're not getting hit with those bank fees. And if you get hit with a $35 overdraft protection fee because you went below $0 on your checking account, this is a significant amount more as a proportion of your income. If you're making $300 per week, that's more than 10% of your income with a $35 fee versus somebody who's making much more money. It's a much smaller fraction of their income that's actually hit with these bank fees, but they do significantly affect poor people much more often than wealthy people. And so this is one you can counteract by finding the right bank for your needs. And there's a lot of different banks out there that can offer this. I like online banks. I think they're pretty great. Some of these like Discover or American Express or CIT Bank that can offer you 2% interest rates with very little fees. I really don't pay bank fees anymore. I got hit with them when I was younger, but you can find a lot of ways around those. Just make sure you do a lot of research into it before you're signing up for bank accounts. All right, and the final one here that's really important to understand is what we call the toilet paper effect. Now, maybe you've heard of this in the past, but this holds a lot of truth to it. So the toilet paper effect, essentially the way that this works is that if you have less money, if you are on a lower income, there's a couple things that can go here. So one of them being that you might not be able to buy 32 rolls of toilet paper at Costco or Sam's Club, but rather 1 roll or 2 rolls because that's all you can afford. And so this actually gives people who are wealthier sort of an upper hand here because they're able to plan this out further because they have the cash reserves to be able to say that they're buying things in bulk, and then they can plan it out for the next month. Now, a way to get around this, or to at least kind of try to alleviate this, is to be able to budget very thoroughly. So I think anybody, regardless of income, should be running a budget. It's very simple to do this. I have some Excel spreadsheets down below in these links if you want to get one of these for free. There's no scheme going on here. This is just totally free to budget and start to find ways that you can find ways to essentially be able to buy 32 rolls of toilet paper instead of having to buy 1. That's just an example there. It's called the toilet paper effect, but this goes with most things. If you're buying food in bulk, it's going to save you more money over the long run, and it's more of a luxury that people have when they are really on their feet financially and doing very well financially. Now, tying into this as well, you can look at something like just something as simple as, say if you are on a lower income and you don't have a car because you can't afford one, but the grocery store is 5 miles away. So instead of being able to go and get a loaf of bread at Walmart for $1.50, you have to go to your local convenience store. It might be $4. That's just another example. That's another thing that is more difficult when you're poor. So those are some things that we listed here in this video. Some of these, as I said, you can counteract. Other ones more difficult, like regressive taxes, but some of these like higher interest rates, $0 down schemes, watching out for predatory businesses, bank fees, those are things that you can get around. And the toilet paper effect is another thing that, so long as you're budgeting, is something that you can hopefully work against. But those are the reasons why it truly is more costly to be poor. It does cost more money. It is more expensive, especially as a proportion of your income, to actually get out of the pit of being in poverty and getting to start climbing higher. That's why people who are born middle class or upper class do have it easier. Now, that's not to say that if you're born poor, you can never get out of this. Millions of people do get out of this, but it is much more difficult. And so if you want to learn more about these topics, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We really do our best to bring out as many videos on these topics as possible, helping people saving money, making more money, and building a better financial future for themselves. If you found any value in it, make sure you share this with somebody who might find some value in it. Thank you, and I'll see everybody in the next video.